So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a primitive bark arrow quiver, just like this one. Yes, this is the one. So I've been looking for a nice straight piece of willow. Has to be about a meter or so of a very straight, roughly 10 centimeter diameter, maybe a little bit bigger. And this looks perfect. So it's not too much damage to the outer bark. I think this will work really, really well. The other thing I'm looking for is further along up towards the top, there's another section that'll be great for making string, which we'll be using as another part of the quiver. So the beauty of a quiver like this is it's made from a single branch of willow. And I should always mention that the trees in this woodland are being managed. A lot of these trees are diseased or misshapen or just too crowded, which is why we're thinning it out. It's been an ongoing process for quite a while now. And it's all part of a strategic management plan to improve the overall health of the wood. So by clearing away all of those unhealthy trees, it allows more sunlight in, which encourages the growth of wildflowers, which the bees love and all the other insects, and it improves the biodiversity of the wood. So if you see me cutting down a tree, don't go shouting at me. Well, you can if you want, I'll just ignore you. But I'm doing it for a very good reason. And it is for the greater good. So while we cut down these trees, any wood gets used to make charcoal or craft items like this quiver I'm about to make. So hope you enjoy the video. So I'm going to cut it off about here, which gives me a little bit of space to work with. But before I make my uppercut, I'm going to make a little cut under here to stop the bark ripping. So I'll just make that cut here. I can feel the tension coming on that already. Pull that out. Now I'm going to make my next cut here. Okay. I think I can still save it. Yeah, there's a little bit of a tear there, but that's fine because I'm using the section from here up. So timber. So the section I'm looking for is down here. We've got a little bit of damage here. So if I cut it off here, I know I've got everything I need to work with. So once again, I'll cut underneath. And now that should prevent the bark from ripping anymore. Okay, nice. Right, now the other piece I want is here. So this section here will make some good cordage. So I'll do the same again. Now that I've harvested a nice piece of willow, I need to take one of the sections and scrape the outer bark off. So it exposes the inner bark, which is what we can use to make cordage. But before we do that, we have to cut it into strips and boil it with some wood ash, which reduces the acidity because willow bark is quite an acidic material. So by using some wood ash, it helps to neutralize that and just gives it a little bit more resilience and makes it a little bit more flexible. So before I can do that, I have to scrape off this outer bark, which is quite a laborious task. And to do it, I tend to use a Laplander saw like this, but any flat scraping tool should do the job. So I'm just getting rid of the green outer bark and exposing this. If you look, it has quite a pinky color. So once all that's looking pink, we can slit it down the middle, cut it into strips, and then we can boil it. So this is going to take a while, so talk amongst yourselves. Just take the last little bit off here, and I think we can call it a day on this part at least. As they say in Australia, she be right. Now that we've got the outer bark off, the next job is to slit this all the way down one side, and then I can remove an entire sheet of bark, or at least that's the plan. So I will be using the Dryad Bowie, which is the perfect tool for this particular task. Try and hold this steady while I start. And very controlled cut down. Okay. Now you've got to cut deeply enough to get through that full layer of bark down to the wood beneath. Should do it. Now this is where you find another use for a survival spatula. Getting this started, so get the spatula into there. And just work our way. It's a perfect tool for this job. So what we're trying to do now is remove this bark, if we can, in one piece. Because it's spring, it's currently mid-May or heading towards mid-May, this bark is coming off really easily because it's got a lot of sap. If you try doing this in the autumn or winter, it's just not going to come away. So now's the time to do this. And the great thing about bark like this is you can take it off at this time of year, roll it up, let it dry out, and then you can soak it and reuse it. So historically, this would have been a valuable material that people would have stocked up in the spring and then used throughout the year for all sorts of things, making cordage, even making containers and baskets and things like that. So a very useful material, and one that's not particularly well used in the modern day. So that's quite a workout to get all this off, but there's plenty of material there. So that's the inner side's white, and then the outer part's got this lovely sort of chestnut pinky colour. Beautiful. Right, so the next thing is to slit this into thin strips that we can use for lashings, and then we need to boil that. So, right, there are a couple of ways you could use to split this down to the size that you want. One of them is to take your dryad bowie, stick it in a log, and then you can very carefully use the blade to cut the willow bark to the thickness that you need. So this is the method I normally use. And because you are pushing towards the blade rather than pulling, and you can sort of pull a little bit as well, but just be extra careful because that is a very sharp knife. So it'd be tricky to try and keep it a uniform thickness. It's getting a little bit thin there, so. Now that we've cut the willow bark to size, or it's close to size, we can always improve on it later on. So we've just got that ready to go now. This can go into the pot. Survival spatula to poke it down. Make sure it's completely covered. And then we can add a few other things. So one of them is the shavings that we had off the outer bark, so we can chuck a load of that in. So I'll also throw some wood ash in as well. This helps to neutralize the acidity. And now we just cook it all up for about an hour, thereabout. Okay. Well, that looks cooked. So what we need to do now is to drain this off, let it dry a little bit, not completely, but just allow the moisture out. So I'm just going to chuck it onto this log. Wow, that looks lovely. Okay, and we'll just leave it there, let it cool down, and then we can sort it out and dry it a little. Now I'm just looking at the length of this because I don't want it to be too long or too short. So as long as we've got this much of the arrow protruding from the quiver, that should be fine. So I think I'll cut it off to about there. I reckon that will work nicely. Now, just like I split the other one down to get the fibres out, I need to do the same here. So I'm going to use the bowie again. Nice deep cut into the wood. But I need to be a lot more careful removing this because I want to keep it intact. So there we go. be able to do the rest with my fingers now. So without forcing it too hard, because even though it feels a little bit like leather, it still has the texture of wood. So we have these longitudinal fibers like that come all the way down. So it's very susceptible to snap if we pull it too hard in that position. So it can't be pulled in every direction, but we can slowly work our way around and just gently tease it away from the wood. If it does split, you can always repair it later on, but do try to avoid any major splitting because it just makes everything a little bit more difficult. There we go. Okay. And there we have it. So it's the inner wood. Now what I need to do is to decide how I'm going to lay this out now. So I've got a little split there, but we can work with that. It's fine. Got another little split at the bottom here. So the worst of the splits is there. Okay. So I'll put the wood back in for now, because it gives us something, helps to support everything. And I'm going to use my knife once again. So I've got the split here, which I can use. I'm going to cut up here, like so. So I'll slide this back up here. So I need to weaken a spot here so that it can be allowed to fold up on itself without splitting. So this section here needs to come up into this area here, so I can take a little bit more off here. I'm going to weaken it at this point, which will allow it to fold a little bit easier. You can see it has a real tendency to try and split along the length, which is why we need to be very careful at this point here. Just kind of work with the material. I'll take a little bit more off here. There we go, okay. I'm just going to mark this now. Okay, I've got the rough line to work to now, so I'll make that slightly longer. As long as you take your time with it, you should get good results. Okay, so let's see if that works now. Okay, that can be neatened up later. There we go. It's like a cross between working leather and wood. You have to kind of think in terms of both materials. So I've got a little split that I need to sort out here, but I can just take a little bit off at this point. And then I can stitch that back together, which should be fine. So that will go over there. I now need to mark all my stitching points. So let's have a look. So we'll make one here. So we need to come both sides of this split to pull that together. Make another one here. You don't want to be too close to the edge because that split can travel. Make another one there. Another one here. And now right, let's trim a little more here before we start.
Yep.
So now we start to... Now we've got a few options for making the holes here. What we don't want to do is just poke it through with a knife, because that will just cause a split to run all the way down. So however we do it, we need to do it quite slowly and just sort of perforate a hole rather than just punching it through with a sharp edge. Now, you could use a broadhead, either a flint or a steel one like this. That seems to work quite well. That's actually done the job beautifully. So you could use the broadhead, or the other option is to use a steel punch like this. And if you keep the wood on the inside, that helps to protect it. This is a leather working punch, but it works really well with this. And the great thing about this tool is that it actually removes a core like that, so that we can lace it up much more neatly. Okay, well, I've perforated all the stitching holes and we've got the bark drying over there, but time is against us today, so I've decided to use some of the raw bark to stitch it together, because I could always redo it another time if I have to, but the raw bark will get the job done just fine. So bear with me. First of all, I'm going to stitch up the bottom part, so I'm going to pull this together. And we need to put this base piece over here, get that stitched up, make sure it's strong enough, and then we can start to work our way up the quiver. Now, bearing in mind, there's not much room to work with. What we need to do is to sort of put all the stitches in position before we tighten it up. And then once we tighten it up, it'll all hold together. So that's the fun bit. Bear with me. Okay. Moving from here. Moving from here. Moving from here. So I'm just going to pull these together, all these strands, pulling individually. Now, I know it looks a bit messy at the moment, but it will all get good. So to begin with, all the lacings are loose because I haven't got enough room to put my hand down in there to pull them through. So I keep it loose so I can thread it all up And then when I'm ready, I can just tension everything together and hopefully it will all hold together nicely. I've wrapped a little piece of bark around the top here. It's all been stitched up. The great thing about this, it's a little bit basic, it's rough, it's very primitive, but the whole thing is made from a single piece of willow. So I've used the bark to stitch it together, I've used the bark for the main body of it. A few places have gone a little bit awry, but I'm not too disappointed. Let's see if it'll hold some arrows. So the quiver's finished. It was a little bit more rough than I was hoping for. We had a few issues along the way, but here it is. As you can see, it's holding arrows, and I've made a strap using a piece of the same bark off the same branch. So a great primitive improvised quiver. Let's see if I can actually hit the target. I'm happy with that. Well, today has been a lot of fun, and it's been interesting to see that you can use tree bark for all sorts of different things. Everything from baskets to containers to an arrow quiver. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please comment down below. Let me know if you've made anything out of tree bark, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time.